Welcome to the work session today. We do have, and we'll start as usual with board and commission interviews. We have a couple interviews to get right to work on. The first one is Taylor Brill, who is interviewing for the Arts Commission. They have up to 11 members, currently with 9, so there is an opening there. So Taylor, please come on up. If you want to why don't you we do have a chair, so if you would like to sit, you can sit. Normally, we don't have that chair unoccupied. So if you would just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be in the Arts Commission, what you think you might bring to it, that'd be great.
I'm Taylor. I moved here in July, so very new to the area, but really, really loving it so far. My background is actually in theater, not visual arts. I know the Arts Commission is a little bit more visual art focused, but I spent 6 years working on and off Broadway, and I'm getting involved in the theater world here, and very excited to get to know all of you and all the cool work that goes on here. So yeah, what questions?
Like that, get right to the point. Anybody have questions? David, do you have any questions? David is our liaison to the Arts Commission, so. See, I told you it would be painless. It doesn't appear that.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
So do we have the questions about how long in residency?
So that was particular to the police community engagement.
Right, that's the only one that
So
had.
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right.
We had a little bit of
Awesome.
under 1 year residence.
And I went to that a couple of places, which I get.
But for Arts Commission, it's not a concern. So, yes, you have a question.
Yeah, have you been involved civically in other communities?
Yeah, so I am from Minnesota originally, and my mom was on the city council of Roseville, which is a suburb of Twin Cities. And she ran for lots of things all the time, so I'm sort of used to the campaigning world and the public service world, and very eager to get involved here because I work from home and I have a 1-year-old, and the more I can get out of the house, the better. So, yeah.
You're not gonna leave the 1-year-old by himself.
No, we have a teenage babysitter.
They have a dog.
I do, we have a dog.
Okay, so this got a little harder than I thought it would.
Awesome.
Other questions? All right, Taylor, thank you. You will hear from city clerk shortly, and you're welcome to stay, and you're welcome to pretend that you're here and go off
Gotta
and do
relieve the
something else for a while.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, and Conrad? Hi, come on up here.
Go on.
Going down, this is Conrad Hebron.
Hebron.
Who comes, like you
Oh,
came from the job site at
Yeah, I
this
didn't know
time.
how long I'd be waiting, so I was just.
You're ready to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
So Conrad is interviewing for the Board of Adjustment, which has one alternate member vacancy, and there was a great desire from the chair of the Board of Adjustment to make sure we fill something soon. Apparently they need you or someone very much like you in that position. So tell us why you would be the right one for that and what you might bring to it.
Well, I have a home remodeling company here. I'm a registered contractor in Webster Groves. I wanted to join the Board of Adjustment. And I think an alternate is a great way to join, to learn kind of the nuance of the city and how the variances are adjudicated, and really for my benefit to learn how I can learn more about the city and serve the people of Webster Groves, but also contribute to Webster Groves by doing my role on the board. So I think I plan to learn a lot and hope to contribute in the ways I'm expected to. And, yeah, I think it'd be a win-win situation for me and I think for the city too.
And just so anybody who might listen to this later, you would then recuse yourself if you're on a project that comes from in front of the board. Is that correct?
Of course, absolutely.
Just wanted to make it
Of
clear
course.
for anyone who might wonder.
No corruption, ambition here.
Please don't for a minute think I attributed that to you. I just wanted it on the record. Are there questions? No? All right, well then, you're even shorter, so you will also hear from our city clerk.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Conrad.
Thank you.
All right, Betty, you've been waiting the longest, I guess. So Betty Bear is applying for one of the two business owner vacancies that we have on the BDC right now. And if anyone doesn't know what business she owns, shame on all of you.
Yes, that's
You have
right.
homework before the next meeting.
Anyway, please.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. My name is Betty Bear. I own Betty's Books, which is a specialty bookstore here in Webster. We're coming up on our 3-year anniversary. And I've been lucky enough to attend some of the BDC events over the past couple years and been really impressed and excited about some of the work that's being done to bring some of the business communities closer together. I think that Webster is an amazing business community, great place to own a business and open a business, but a lot could be done to make things more unified for everyone. Then more people will come here. So I'm very excited about all of that. I can contribute a lot of, like I said, enthusiasm, but also I'm not from here originally, so I do think there's some fresh insight maybe that could come from that. And then also, I'm organized and, friendly. So that helps when you're welcoming new businesses.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
All right, questions?
I think you'll be a great addition to the BDC.
Yeah, I was excited to see your name.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you very much, and we
Thank
will
you.
be in touch.
Thank you.
And just so when we get to the point of the agenda to review these appointments, we'll also consider Emily Horton, who served 1 year on the Green Space Advisory Commission and would like to be appointed to a full term this time. But we'll do that in a few minutes, and at the moment, we'll go to issues and updates. Did we lose David? David, how about we start with you for issues and updates, since I don't want to forget.
Did he hear you?
Oh,
Sorry, David. Can you hear me now? He cannot. So, all right, we're gonna start with you, Pam, then.
The only thing I have is Friday is the last Old Orchard concert from 7 to 8:30. It'd be great if everybody could come out. I know I'm planning to go up there. It's supposed to be a beautiful night, and this is a rescheduled. The band is called Kid Centric.
it's nice.
Yes.
It's nice.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Jamie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I went with my colleagues to the MSD luncheon to learn all about their new things rolling out. That was interesting. The BDC coffee had a great turnout. In other BDC news, the Walktoberfest is happening on October 19th. A whole Fall Fest is happening the last weekend in October. That's Webster wide, fun little activities. And I think Blue Dot is up and running. Is that right, Mr. Peterson? So that's really great. And the businesses are excited about having that connectivity with the shopping community. Let's see, also what discussed at the BDC was their vision for the next year, and they've landed on a couple of quarterly events that are yet to be determined, but they decided to kind of set a cadence for City Hall to be prepared to help support. And then 2 coffees and 2 happy hours. So lots of fun things happening with BDC. I attempted to join this SS4A task force meeting. I had some issues with the Zoom connection, but I did watch it shortly after. And all of that seems really amazing, and I'm really excited about that that kickoff and that group of people who were part of that conversation. It's a really great group. Jazz Fest was awesome. And then the last thing is I attended an event with Sean and Kadi and Lydia were there as well, called Circularity STL. And it was really cool just talking, like it was sponsored by Ripple Glass Recycling, just talking about like different ways that the St. Louis region businesses and other organizations can come together to kind of like close the loop in sustainability, recycling, and resource use and all this jazz. So it was really great.
Thank you.
I got to go to sustainability to fill in for Councilman Nicholas. That was really fun. That's a great commission and learn about what they have going on. They had an eco-ed this at 5:30 today doing a watershed wander. That looks like a beautiful night, so hopefully that was a good event. And then they are planning for the pumpkin smash for after Halloween.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be the first Saturday. They landed on the first Saturday again after Halloween, which is shortly after Halloween. And I don't know that the location has been solidified yet. That was still kind of open, but watch for more details on that coming up. That was exciting. And then they talked about the composting grant went out and gave a lot of kudos to everybody who worked very hard on that, city leadership that worked hard on that. And then they had a debrief on a historic potential HPC collaboration that they had. So it was some good inter-commission communication going on there.
Full meeting.
It was a full meeting
Yeah.
and it was 1 hour. So good job.
Official group.
Good,
Yeah.
really well run meeting. So it was great to go to that. Green Space hasn't met since we met last as a council. And Plan Commission notice went out that October meeting is canceled and the next one will be the beginning of November.
Right,
Great.
great.
Karen?
Parks and Rec was a good meeting. We met prior to the meeting, with Dave and, company to talk about, possible alternative revenue streams for, an indoor pool. And I think we were saying we were gonna have a different presentation or something on that, so I didn't.
We have one this evening.
Okay, so I'll just
Yeah,
let
if you
that
wouldn't
go to the
mind,
end.
yeah,
so-
thank you.
Other things that were interesting, well, Scott indicated that things are on schedule for the pool. They just finished, or they're about close to finishing all the stormwater repairs and everything. One of the things that he was stating that there's public engagement is still forthcoming for the outdoor theater portion. There was again an interesting proposal from none other than Dave. That's about even the outdoor theater. It's like consider using that money for a public-private investment in the Ozark Theater. If that was, if that were able to become available or something, just something to think about. I thought that was pretty interesting. So pretty much everything is just progressing. The plan is to have the ice rink build start in March of 2025. And then nothing yet has been decided on. There were discussions around changing the parade route for 4th of July parade. Nothing has been decided yet, but more to come.
Thank you. David, do you have anything for us?
Nothing, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. Emerson?
Just one announcement, the PCEB met and we had a 2-hour meeting. They're in the thrust of reevaluating their purpose and mission. So they'll probably be submitting some type of recommendations to council probably by the first of the year. So they had a real good discussion on hopefully some directions that they can take and still fulfill the original purpose of PCEB. So we're having 2-hour meetings. So they're moving right along. Yeah.
Come in.
No, man.
Katie? They've got more ma'ams in a row than I ever did. All right, I do have a couple. We had, I thought, a really good board and commission chair and vice chair meeting discussion. The board and commission handbook is now live on the city website. One of the things I asked you all in email, but I'll raise it again, and board chairs were asked the same thing at the meetings. If there is anyone on your boards or commissions who want a hard copy of it, would you just collect a number for us, and Katie will work on getting those printed out and distributed, but we're not just going to print for the sake of printing. So, but we don't want people who feel like that's better accessibility for them to be limited to the online version either. Let's see. Thank you for those of you who went to the MSD meeting, especially because that's how we found out that the OMCI money was somehow not going to come to fruition, which gave us time to, I actually then the next day I sat next to Brett Berthold at the St. Louis Community League executive board meeting and started that conversation again with the mayors in the room. So I'm not sure we would have been able to get our stuff together if we had gotten a little bit of warning about that coming down so quickly. So thank you for that. Last week, Mr. Peterson and I were in Kansas City for the National League of Cities City Inclusive Entrepreneurship closing conference, which was fantastic. We've done 3 projects with them. NLC is going to take a year and kind of review the 5 years of the project that they've done, and then come back with some other incarnation of it, they hope. And so I think we both made it pretty clear we'd love to be a part of that when the next round comes out, and that we'd be happy to help in evaluation if necessary. So it was a very good conference. And then today was my day to be with kids. I spent some time with the Mary Queen of Peace first graders and a bunch of kids at Gibbons who are participating in Freedom School there. And I understand that you're going to see them next week.
Can't wait.
One of their questions for me that you need to be prepared for, because I told them to ask you, is what is it like if you have to fire someone?
Wow.
It's like, wow, we're really getting in there, aren't we?
They grow up so fast now.
They do. My only response was it wasn't my job. So
You can't wiggle out of that.
Yeah.
Tells me what to do.
Okay, there you go. However you want to do it. All right, we are then now, I think, has anyone now remembered something that they'd like to add?
Yeah.
It's our usual pattern, so please go right ahead.
So I read something in the Kirkwood Times, which is Webster Kirkwood Times, which is, I know, weird for me because anyway.
Just remember, we're being recorded.
And there was an individual that expressed concerns about just the blatant disregard for the do not call list from telemarketers and what have you. And so when I had a particular experience the last couple of days, guys kind of left it just the nicest message. And so I called them back the next day and very nicely, and how are you? And are you local? What's the name of your business? What's your address? Where are you? I said, okay, well, I'm on the state and federal do not call list. And you guys continuously call. You know, so he was like, I'm sorry, it was my guy. And I'm like, well, he works for you, so you're responsible for it. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that we can do something from the perspective of, and I don't even know how this would work. If we could, even in a combination of the area, Webster, Kirkwood, whatever, set up even where people could log in the names and the address of companies that have called them, so that we could together send a complaint to the state or something, because these people just blatantly disregard. And they are basically just hounding and harassing people to sell, to try to sell their homes and what have you. And, or either, if it's even other things, that maybe it's some kind of medical, whatever they're trying to sell to senior citizens, or, just, and just some way to get some type of visibility for the community on the issue of the blatant disregard for the do not call out, and report that to the Secretary of State's office, because these people just disregard it because they gamble that nobody's going to report them. And so I don't know what that looks like. I know we're talking about, I don't know if it's our ability to set up just a website or email where our community could log in and put in that name and phone number, so that we could try to, and also see if there's a pattern from particular sources, or whatever, or something, because it's just, they just completely disregard it. But I do remember in the comment section of the Webster Kirkwood Times a couple of weeks ago, somebody in there asking what can be done, because it seems like when you just are contacting the Secretary of State's office is one-offs, you don't get any kind of,
Right. Okay, well, something to think about. I don't know.
yeah, I don't
Yes.
know what we can do, but something to think about,
So the Attorney General's office has a website.
right?
And in the website, there is a place where you can go to report people who violated. And again, you've said people don't realize it's there. We could put that on our website and say, if you've been a victim of that, we could give them the information. It's a telephone number. People usually are willing to make phone calls. So if you have to do more than that, people aren't willing to do it.
Mhm.
You know, again, I don't know that that will necessarily allow people to, that will cause people to make a complaint who otherwise aren't inclined to do it. I don't know how you keep a database like that, though. I mean, the only way you can really do it, I think, is through something like the Attorney General's office.
Mhm.
But I can reach out to the Attorney General's office and say, we've got complaints about this beyond your website. What can we do? And report back to you.
And another thing you do, there's such thing, you do a class action suit. Once you know it's ABC companies
Mhm.
doing it, you
Right,
can,
and that's why I was saying if there was somewhere, if we noticed a like standout of companies or somebody that's constantly calling, especially
Yeah.
these people that are saying they'll buy your house for cash, or even some of the people, if we notice a pattern from a particular companies, or I don't know, just,
The problem is going to be the database and keeping the database and managing the database.
right.
You know, it would be expensive to put it together. You know, there are a lot of things you'd have to do to make sure that that worked. I don't know that beyond the Attorney General's office, there is an economical or efficient way to do that. And I don't know how efficient they are. I've made complaints to them before. They don't call you back and say, here's what we did. You know,
Right.
again, it's simply, you give them the phone numbers, and that's really the best that can be done. I mean, I hate to sound so cynical about whether they can do anything, but let me call and see what I can
Yeah,
find out.
that'd be great
I'll
if you
report
would
back to you.
report back to us and maybe ask them, just so we can tell people.
Right,
If you leave a message with them, what happens next?
Here's what's
Since we don't
exact.
hear, it'd be at least nice to provide that information to people.
Right. So there is a no call, frequently asked questions part of this too, as the Attorney General's website. But if, perhaps we can put that on our website and say, if you've been the victim of these calls, here's what you do. Because you can not only make a phone call, but you can do an online complaint too. I think everybody does the easiest way, which is a phone call, right? So I don't know how effective or efficient any of those are, but at least if we point people in that direction, maybe we're doing something.
and even if we can even give them some information, like, don't, because it's so easy for me to get irritated and just hang up on them instead of playing the nice game, so that you can actually get a name and a number, and so that you have information to report. So I don't know, just things that we could even recommend people do so that they can obtain the information to be able to
Let
report.
me make some calls.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to our topics then, please. And I believe Mr. Peterson is there to begin our IT master plan
I am
discussion.
here to begin, and first of all, introduce to you a man who hates sitting at this table and does not want to come in front of council, but he's going to pull his chair right over here next to me. Steve Bader has been with us for 24 years, and this probably
Wait,
is.
maybe you should sit up here.
No, yeah, this is enough here.
That's too much.
But,
Sorry, Steve.
We really wanted Steve's voice in this because we're going to hear from Daniel Kavika and John O'Shaughnessy, who I know is somewhere on there. They'll be coming on camera from Insight to recap what they learned here with us as we've gone through our IT master plan and strategic planning. I would say, as a non-technology person, this is an amazing report. It gives some benchmarks, maturity scores, things that IT professionals can use. And I really want to turn to Steve as an IT professional, because it's not my world. But Steve, what are your thoughts about this plan as we prepare to go through it, and what do you see its effect for Webster Groves?
We've been the IT department, all two of us. We've been very happy with the results we got from Insight. We have looked around quite a bit, talked to some other companies, and this has been far beyond what we were able to get talking to anybody else. I feel it's important for the city that we get this foundation in place in technology as we try to move forward. As we've moved forward and we started to develop a mobile workforce, we started to see that that foundation isn't as secure as we'd like it to be. As we try to address other pain points that we have throughout the city, we need to put technology in there. We need to move that technology forward, but we need to make sure that we're doing it off a solid base. And I believe that's what the information they're delivering and the roadmap they're going to show, I believe that puts us in that direction.
I'm not gonna belabor it. I'll turn to John and Danny to go through this, Daniel. But I'm gonna just stress, you're gonna hear a lot about, we're always working on operational response and you can never get to the projects. That's really a capacity question. I just want to if you would hold that in your mind as they bring us their insights from Insight. So with that, John and Daniel.
Alrighty, Eric. So I'm sharing out my screen. Just wanted to make sure that you're able to see that. Okay.
We're good.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, my name is Daniel Krupicka. My counterpart, John, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yep. Hello, John O'Shaughnessy, also from Insight, and we will try to keep this snappy and short and within our time limits. But it was a wonderful opportunity to work with Steve and with Eric and all the folks at Webster Groves. You guys were really, really helpful throughout this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have a really beautiful community. It's very gorgeous. And it's just, a little personal aside for me, as I was there and I was checking things out, I slid the Webster Groves, or I'm sorry, Webster University information over to my daughter, who's a prospective college student. So it's on her short list. So, so it ended up being a weird kind of thing for me, but it turned out to be really awesome. So. Okay. All right. So we'll jump into it now. If anybody has any questions as we go, please feel free to ask. We're going to try not to go down any kind of too technical or nerdy rabbit holes here, but we just wanted to make sure that, if you do have a question, please feel free to ask. We want to make sure that you come away with this with a good understanding of what we're trying to present and, the message that we're trying to communicate. So we had a great on-site workshop. It was really good. Everybody was very, very helpful. I mean, that was one thing. Everybody really came to the table. And so one of the things that we did is when we started out, we started listening, right? We asked a lot of questions. Everybody brought very good feedback to us. It was all very constructive. It was all good. Everybody had great intentions bringing that there. And one of the things that we did is when we went back and we started taking a look at all of our data, and then we started reviewing the 5-year master plan. The 5-year master plan is a good plan. We didn't really have any problems with it. It's from an IT standpoint. We reviewed it from an IT technology standpoint. The rest of it, I don't know. But from an IT technology standpoint, really good. It had a lot of really good stuff in there. And we tried to base all of our recommendations and map all of our recommendations to that master plan. I mean, that is what a master plan is for. And one of the things I would like to echo for this is that there's a lot to do from technology. The world is changing from a technology standpoint, and a lot of the staff, they've brought technology demands from their backgrounds. They're used to working with a lot of different technology, and the staffing is stretched, right? Like that's one of our number one big things that's there. That was a big thing that came up on our list. Looking at cloud migration. So Azure cloud migration, that's going to be an important part of our recommendations because, you want to be able to maximize the use of your resources. You want to be able to, so that they're doing the smart things for the community and not just repetitive tasks. And so a couple of things that were also brought to us: lack of a formal help desk and trouble ticketing system, some inconsistent asset tracking. This really plays into security. You can't protect it if you don't know what you have. Business continuity and disaster recovery. I mean, we're seeing that, you look at the news, there's all kinds of stuff going on to where that's important. Technology outages affect people in a big way. I don't know if anybody there has had any kind of issues with the Verizon outage that was yesterday in our area. It was affecting. I mean, if you have Verizon phone service, it didn't work yesterday, and that means email and internet and stuff as well. And so, really trying to create that enterprise class to IT services, right? How does this taking it to the next level?
So again, as Daniel mentioned, we were able to tie our recommendations back to your strategic plan. And so you'll see this throughout our report. What we've done here is this page here, and we're not going to go through everything in the slide, but these were the key areas we pulled out that matched to IT or finance IT that we felt were things that we could tie back to the recommendations. And again, we'll just move on to the next one, Daniel, just for time's sake. The other thing too is we always recognize that though we're technologists at heart, technology is not ever the sole solution. People are the ones who are in need of the technology. People who are using technology, and it's all part of the process. And the processes that you use to implement technology, it can be either a big complex thing that doesn't get used well, or maybe it's something that isn't that complex. But if people take the time, build a process, and know how to use that technology, you can wring lots of value out of it. So we always try to approach these things, making sure that we touch on the people side and the process side, as well as technology.
So
cookies. We have to show the cookies.
You know what we do? We were really happy. It was, Eric got cookies for the workshop. It was really great. Nice little local bakery. They made us little computer nerd cookies. We couldn't have left that out of the presentation. It was a highlight for us, for sure.
So again, just kind of summarizing, we had 9 separate sessions. We discussed pain points. Really, we were there to listen. We had some, ways to direct these questions. Also, before we showed up for the on-site workshop, we had sent out a questionnaire to Steve. And we always start these things with, look, there's a lot of questions here. You may have some of this information. If you don't, that's okay. Steve was able to assemble a massive amount of fantastic information. Again, given the size of the IT organization, it's fantastic what he was able to put together. So again, you've really got a good kernel of how to move these things forward.
And we talked to a lot of different departments. It was a whirlwind day for us, but like I said, everybody was really great, and we had a lot of representation. Well, actually, we had representation from everybody, and people came prepared. There were a lot of people that really came prepared. They brought their their wants, their needs, their desires, their pain points, which is fine. That's great to be able to hear that stuff, to be able to craft that technology plan. And so when we took and we looked at those issues, we wanted to make sure that we listened to those, right? So these little sticky notes are up here. They're in no particular color coding or really order, but it was just this was just a myriad of topics that were brought up and discussed, whether they were pain points or, some of them didn't necessarily relate to IT, but yet, different technology areas. And we wanted to be able to recognize that and reflect that back to the contributors, that we did in fact listen and categorize and document some of the issues that we heard. So one of the things, so what we're going to do is we're going to step through some of our findings and recommendations. We had 5 major areas that we really looked at: IT staffing, technology planning, help desk, knowledge management. That was a big topic. That was actually a really big topic of discussion. And then, of course, cloud computing. That was there.
So I'll take us through this first slide. And again, we have 5 key slides, and they all follow the same format, where over on the left, we describe the challenge as we heard it. And then where possible, we tied it to the strategic plan. So that's the bottom part. In the center part of the slides, what we call the ultimate targets, this is where you would want to get to. This is the goal. But below that are some quick wins. What are the things that can be done on a shorter time frame to really start down the path of solving the various issues? Over to the right, potential solutions. These are things that we talked about. Some of the things make great sense now. Some may be better sense further down the road. Some may be things that don't fit, but there are things that we want to throw out there as far as these are the world of the solutions in these areas. And then also, again, down below, one of the things that we try to bring is what are others in the industry doing? What are other smaller municipal governments doing in these different areas? So that you, if you choose a path, it's a path that makes sense. As you're talking to your other colleagues, et cetera, they'll kind of know where these things fit, because it's difficult to go off and do your own thing. We find that that can sound attractive, but oftentimes it's really difficult to support. So when it comes to staffing, again, the key point here, and we just heard this again, is there's been this baseline. It's been created over time, and it's done a really good job of putting out the services that the city has needed. But things change, and things get faster and faster and faster. One of the key things, for example, for us is different departments would come in, and Public Works might say, you know, we really need a better asset tracking system for the cars and for the tanks and the trucks, et cetera. But you know what? Who's going to work on that along with Public Works? It's going to be Steve or Jonathan. But if they're busy trying to fix someone's laptop, they don't have the bandwidth to go forward and help with these projects. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but an example when you're tight on those sorts of things, IT can't help and bring up examples like, you know, if we're bringing in a new software solution, IT is going to have some requirements such as security related things. And we need to help make sure that IT staffs have the ability to participate and bring those other types of requirements in to help the needs of the whole community. That's what I've got there.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we also put IT staffing up front, because we wanted to recognize the fact that the city has a small IT staff, and what we're going to talk about is going to require some effort, right? It's going to require manpower, and that's one of those things where we didn't want anybody to walk away from this thinking, oh yeah, well, all this stuff will be easy and we can only do it with 2 people and that would be, just fine. And we can, we just wanted to make sure that that was recognized at the very beginning. One of the things that we see, and this is something that it's not unique to Webster Groves, as it's really growing pains in IT departments, enterprise IT departments. And that is, as things go, a lot of things are tribal knowledge. It's the people that are working. There's not a lot of things that are, documented. The different departments are operating maybe autonomously and doing their different things. They're trying to get their job done. They're trying to do the right thing. But when it comes to IT and really to get that enterprise class IT system and be able to deliver those services in a very professional way that, where they perform well, they're always up and available. And, it's what people have come to expect today from technology. Part of that's technology planning. And this is one of those things that we felt was really, really key. And that's really, having all of the departments, everybody that comes to the table and they need IT services, and they need to use technology, is really to create a technology planning, technology steering committee. This technology steering committee, the purpose of this is to be able to get input, but also so that people have ownership into this process as well. An example of, I don't want to call out any particular department, but because this happens everywhere, I'm not trying to single anybody out, but some department buys some technology widget. And it's very important for them to do whatever it is, the job that they're doing, right? They've researched it, it's great or whatever, and then they bring it to Steve and they say, hey, here you go, hook this thing up, make it work, and all of that. That's definitely the wrong approach for consuming IT, especially these days. We have to consider questions about, is this secure? Is the, how do we log into it? What password do we use to get into it? Who all can access it? What kind of data? Where is that data stored at? Is there any, private data that would be consumed in this service that we would need to protect in some way? So those are all the questions. And basically the job of the technology steering committee is to really ask questions. It's really to understand the technology and also understand its life cycle. Everybody's happy about adopting a technology. How does it die? How does it go away? How do we get something new if it no longer functions the way that we need it to, or the company goes bankrupt or something like that, the service is impacted? These are all questions of the technology steering committee where they ask that about it. It's, this is something so that everybody can really understand how it works. And then if there's a deficiency in it, that's something that's a matter of discussion. Do we accept this? Do we want this so much? We're willing to put up with this deficiency in it because maybe it's hard to log in, or it only works on Apple platforms and not Android, or vice versa, something like that. And that's one of those things where that technology steering committee comes together. The very end of this, we've given examples of how to do that and how to set that up and how to evaluate those technologies so that every department comes together as a partner in making sure that the technology is thought out, it's implemented, it's well run, and it really meets the purpose. And hopefully it's cost effective as well.
So IT Help Desk, one of the things that we see today is Steve and Jonathan try to be as responsive as they absolutely can. And what that often means is they get help desk requests by someone walking in and saying, here, I have a problem, can you fix it? And if a person is interrupted all day long trying to help somebody, that means they're not making any forward progress on any other projects. So one of the simple tools to help fix that is a piece of software to formalize your help desk, taking in tickets, writing them down. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it starts to log these systems so you get a sense of how many tickets are coming in, how many are, can be sliced and diced to say how many are desktop related, how many are password reset requests, how many are helping with an application. And it can help justify where time should be spent as you move forward. So again, we pointed out some examples of some, software that can be used to do this. And I think the key thing in a lot of this is there are tools, there are pieces of software, but the key thing that I think is let's figure out what the requirements are, make them simple so that you can be successful implementing them and you don't have to go off and buy a super fancy, expensive piece of software. Just get a process in place, because the minute you start tracking these things and you get folks in the habit of opening a ticket, and knowing that their thing may not be fixed right away if there's something more important, but that it isn't going to get lost. It won't fall off the table. It's a change in culture, but I think it will help Webster Groves overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And this also helps manage those, incidents, service requests, and also projects. The real example is it's hard to build that deck on the back of the house when you have to keep running in to put out the fire, right? Operational incidents, that's the fire. And they always demand more attention than the projects. If you have to deal with operational support and projects, operations always wins out, projects always get delayed. So, that's definitely something that we definitely see with growing technology organizations, for sure. Industry trends that I would like to point out, we point this a lot to a lot of these solutions. A lot of things that we're looking for are cloud first, self-hosted systems. So if you are going to go with a system and you are going to consume some type of technology, on that technology steering committee, the first question is that, is this a cloud first? Is this a software as a service? Can we buy this? So what's a cloud first system? Well, if anybody out there does any accounting, you could have you could have a spreadsheets and do it that way. You could have a paper ledger, or, QuickBooks used to make like software that you could get on like, CD-ROMs and floppy disks, that's all gone away. Now you consume it on the internet, right? It's apps, it's internet and all of that. It takes away your responsibilities from day to day of running that. Ooh, knowledge management. This was a really big topic with a lot of the departments. And this was something that, quite honestly, all organizations of all sizes, they struggle with this. There are some good ways to be able to alleviate some of the problems with knowledge management. And some of it just takes some discipline. One of the things that one of the constant things that we heard from a feedback standpoint is sorry, one of the things we heard from a feedback standpoint was that people needed to get access to information. And part of the things that we can do is, in the coming future, leveraging artificial intelligence to be able to help organize, catalog, and record this data. Like for right now, this meeting could be recorded. Or I mean, this meeting is recorded, but it could have an AI assistant that's taking transcription, that's logging that into notes, and being able to store that for past access so that you don't have to have a secretary there typing it up. Believe it or not, the Microsoft Copilot AI is really good at taking notes, scarily so. It's really good at taking notes. It can detect nuance as well. Like if we just decided to have a little chit chat right now, it would know that that's a chit chat, conversation versus an actual meeting topic. So, those are the type of things, being able to leverage that. So, how do you leverage that? Well, there were some things like people recording YouTube videos. Hey, I've recorded YouTube videos, and I can tell you there's a lot of work that's in that. So you're like, well, what am I going to do with Copilot? Well, if you needed to record a process for somebody to see, either out in the field or in the office, you could record it with AI, like with Copilot enabled. You could record it. It would transcribe that, build your notes, build your process while you're recording it, and easily record it from your phone or your laptop computer and be able to post it for internal or possibly format it for external consumption, if you needed to do that. It's just leveraging tools that you'll be able to have, or that you'll have to do that. Copilot for government is not there just yet, but that will be coming next year.
And again, cloud computing, and it's kind of broad. You hear these terms, what does it mean? What the simple answer is, if you've got servers in a room in a basement, you're running it locally. And at the end of the day, what you'd like to do is move as many of your services to be running in somebody else's data center. And the full realization of that is some of the larger cloud providers. And so it's either putting things up in Azure or AWS, or when you're talking about a particular software package, you may be running your ERP or accounting system, and it's running as their software as a service, or you may hear it just called SaaS. And the key thing there is it is not running in your data center. You don't have to worry about upgrading the software or the hardware. You don't have to worry if a room floods, etc. That becomes someone else's problem. Now, of course, you're paying for it, but ideally, these things are spread across in such a way that it becomes cost effective and you have better solutions. It's really important when you have an organization, and the end goal is not to be an IT infrastructure organization. It's to be a service to your community. And so we take that whole idea of the applications, the support, the tooling that helps you support Webster Groves as a community, that's your target. And whatever pieces of that really aren't important to be done internally, let's have someone else do that. And that's what cloud providers can do. So again, this wasn't a brand new thing. These are things that Steve came to us saying, these are things that we're trying to approach. And so we have a bunch of experience in helping people do those migrations. And like so much of these processes, key thing is understanding what you've got, what is the scope and scale of it, so that you can start to do these migrations in a way that it isn't going to negatively impact your ability to deliver services to your folks. And again, it's absolutely a long-term goal. It doesn't happen overnight. But the key is it becomes an ongoing expense of a operational expense as opposed to a capital expense, where you often have like one big purchase and that kind of covers you for a while, and you get another big hump of a purchase. Whereas operating expenses, you can plan for them and they're more consistent over time. So that usually helps on the budgeting process as well. So there's a boatload of technology stuff that we've focused on with Steve. We're not going to get into that tonight, but it's there. We absolutely agree it's a right way forward.
Absolutely. So one of the things we did is, we like to help organizations sort of understand where they're at and where they need to go. And so one of the ways that we measure maturity is the capability maturity model integration, or CMMI. And basically it's a way in IT, but it's not just in IT. You can use this for other processes and other parts of businesses and organizations. But it's really an effective way to be able to manage those processes and measure where you're at. So what we did is we took some measurements, and as you can see, there's really 5 steps. Now, in the 5 steps, everybody, do we have any people out there? We're the A students, right? Any A students out there? No, I don't know. Are you afraid to raise your hand? You know what I mean? Like the people are like, I got to get an A in this. I got to be, you know what I mean? Why aren't we at a 5? We should be at a 5. Okay, so this is one of those things where we help people understand where their target maturity is at, because not every organization is going to grow to the level to where they're at an optimized maturity. Okay. And actually, Webster Groves, there's a lot going for Webster Groves. There are some unofficial IT policies. That's one of our recommendations, that those are adopted. And, you know, they're updated and adopted right away, because those policies are good IT policies. They reflect how to run an enterprise class system. And that's really what gave this maturity a bump up to 2.0. Getting a 2.0 with 2 people is generally not done. That's hard to do. And so where are we at, right? Processes are basic and formally documented, require similar circumstances to be repeated and tactical in nature. Yeah, okay. So where do we want to go on this? Our target maturity for the organization would be somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. This is something that you would want to evolve to over the next few years in your master plan, where, you know, the technology steering committee, yeah, we're basically adding more process to it, but it's process in a good way, right? Not red tape. It's process to avoid all the pitfalls and frustration of owning certain IT systems later on that become big, large, expensive, complicated, and unmanageable. That's really not what you want. No organization wants that, no matter the size, and especially smaller organizations don't want that, right? And to be able to get up in there into that managed state, you know, that's whenever you're going to start leveraging probably some third parties, maybe some managed services with that, and that sort of thing. That's that target maturity growth. As part of the maturity assessment, we also did a security triage. We had one of our security experts. We had a meeting with Steve, you know, asked Steve all kinds of questions. There was a big bright light involved. You know, so actually Steve was really great. And so he went through there, and from a security standpoint, you know, we're using that same CMMI model to be able to understand where they're, you know, where it's at. So what happened is that also from a security standpoint, the security, I mean, it's not bad, right? So it's an initial managed state of 2.0. I think there's still some more work that can be done, but at the end of the day, it's really that, really that target, right? That target is going to be between a 3 and a 3.5 for that defined and quantitative state, okay, for security. Security is, you know, one of those things where there's a lot to be able to push that up there. But some things that need to happen, right? You know, regular penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, you know, all of that type of stuff. But, you know, there's lots of good framework already in place from a security standpoint. It's just one of those things. It's just a tough battle for everybody. It has to be constantly fought, and people have to be constantly vigilant with security. That's one of those things where security also requires cooperation from the users, the staff, the different departments. You know, yes, you're going to have to use multi-factor authentication. Yes, it's going to have an app on your phone. You're going to have to log in. You know, I'm sorry, you know, some of the passwords are going to be complicated. You know, the move to passwordless by using authenticators is actually a better way to go, and those type of things. So those are some of the key recommendations that were in there. John, do you want to take the tech committee, or do you want me to?
No, yeah, absolutely. And again, I know we're sensitive on time here, so we probably should try to wrap it up in about 3 minutes, I'm guessing. So I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Again, you've got the material here. Because one of the key things we were recommending is this technology steering committee, we wanted to give a little guidance on what it does and how to put it together. Daniel talked a bit about kind of why you would do this. And so that's what this slide covers. So let's just go to the next couple slides, and we'll talk about some of the nuts and bolts. And really, it's picking perhaps a representative, perhaps a department head, and building up this team. And really what you're going to do is just come together, maybe it's once a month, and review any requests that are out there. And it's getting agreement on what are the things that are important. Understanding what the problem is, understanding what the requirements are, is really probably the biggest and most important activity that you can do. And then of course there's pieces you can wrap around this, is building your standard technology so that people sort of have a sense of what it needs to do to plug in. So for example, one of the things we talk about is making access to these systems both secure and easy. And one way to do that, they refer to it as single sign-on or SSO. And so you want to make sure that any application that the city brings in can be tied into a single SSO tool. So ideally, a person only has to log into city resources one time with one account, one password, and it will just allow them into timekeeping and scheduling and other things that are city services. So these are the kinds of things that would be ideal that a technology steering committee makes sure it happens. And again, so we've got some examples here.
Yeah, we have that broken down into 2 steps. The first step is really just a high level technology review. This is somebody, there's and why are we saying this? Well, we're saying this because a lot of these departments and the representatives there, they were all bringing their technology to our meeting. They were like, hey, we want to do things like this, and they want to embrace technology and do technology to better do their jobs more consistently, and be able to provide a better value to the community. So as those technologies come in, how do we assess those? Well, we ask questions, right? You know what I mean? And some things are kind of simple. You're like, wow, there's a problem statement. What's the problem we're trying to solve? That's a question that should be asked every time. It seems like a simple one, but it's probably one of the most missed questions that there is that we get, right? By the time they bring us into it, nobody can answer that question. So, that's what we see pretty often. And then as you go down, and the goal here. So the goal here in step 1 is to get to a proof of concept. Let's bring this technology in and let's do a proof of concept. Does it actually work? Does it have some value? Can we try it out in a lab? Or can we get a demo from the vendor? And then step 2 is wherever, this is where some investment starts, right? We're really trying to move forward with a pilot implementation and making sure that pilot implementation is successful and gates for a full implementation. And again, these are just steps and things that you learn. So typically, how does this work? You're like, well, how does this work? Generally, what we do is somebody that's coming to a technology, this technology steering committee, they're going to put together a PowerPoint template that's already made up with these questions, and they just answer them. As you go through it, it can be less formalized than that, but what you're seeking for is you're seeking agreement, but also questions to make sure that there's no gotchas.
Daniel, John, I think we've got time to get to the roadmap and then probably take questions.
And we're here. Okay, John, I'll let you hit the roadmap.
So what we put together here is, and again, there's a lot, and we know we're throwing a lot out there, and that's why Eric and Steve have had time to chew on this, is we took items that we had in our 5 key recommendation areas and pulled out various items from the quick wins sections and laid it out over this 8-quarter timeline. And what we did is we initially laid out things that we felt you should do first, and then the other things are sort of laid out as it goes. And of course, this is just our recommendation. Things can move around. But we absolutely think you should start with creating this steering committee, partially because, frankly, it's low cost. Get a group of people together, sit down and walk through those few pages we've put together and start thinking about how to tune this for Webster Groves, because it will really help you to get that process going. The other things that happen right away is, you really need to look at bringing in some additional IT staff. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but I think that that's a process that you should get going right away, because of course you can't hire good IT staff to fit in your environment overnight. And it's really important, the smaller the organization, the more important fit is. And you absolutely need to have a person that's good fit for this. And you'll see some of these other things start to trickle in. Start thinking about getting a help desk implemented. Start thinking about processes to use to improve the documentation, getting into that knowledge management. And there's a long line in the middle there. You'll see it's called workload alignment, workload migration. And this is this idea of getting towards cloud computing. And it starts with effectively an inventory of the systems and applications and services that you provide, so that you can figure out, how do we move forward? What might be retired? What's got to move? What do we already have in place because we're working with a vendor and Magnet's moving to a new system and we're going to take advantage of it, or something like that. And then you define, where does the effort need to go and what needs to happen sooner rather than later. And then you actually can get into the nuts and the bolts of the migration. And so what I often talk to customers about is, the planning may take 6 months to a year. The actual migrations may take much less time than that if you've done the planning properly. And the beauty of doing the planning properly, you're not impacting any of your IT services at that time. So it's a long process, but it's better to take a little bit longer and do it right and not impact your services. So this is kind of our key summary of the roadmap.
And just a quick thing on this roadmap, we mapped out the time frame to match up with the strategic plan to have the cloud migration done. This is where that cloud migration should be done per the strategic plan. I mean, if everything goes on track and a good, from the information that Steve gave us from the, initial, I mean, he's done initial tasks on workload alignment as to where things need to go and, what's going and what's in the data center and all of those key data points. There's a good bit of this that's already done.
All right, John and Daniel, thank you very much for this. And I feel like we don't do this enough, but I'm going to take a moment because Steve, you got a lot of kudos in there, kind of hidden along because you do such a great job, and Jonathan as well. And so just on behalf of all of us, thank you for that. And thank you being so prepared for this so that it can be as good a product as it is. So are there questions right now? I know I feel like I need to digest a little bit more, but if anybody has questions at the moment, now's the time.
I guess I just want to understand what that task force looks like. Who comprises that task force?
So what we think of with the steering committee, it's IT, of course, but it's also management of the different departments. So for example, when we were on site, we met with the police department, fire department, public works. So I would imagine it would be made up of representatives of each of those organizations. Again, you may look at this and go, that's too many people, and figure out how to trim it down. But it's your key internal customer constituents, ideally one representative who's fairly senior in that organization to help drive that process.
Great, thank you.
Every one of the organizations that we talked to, they were all bringing technology needs to the table. They had their shopping list of things, technology wise, that they wanted, whether it was different applications or apps or even I mean, there was conversation with drones and managing fleet management, fuel and all of these things where there are technology needs there. And that's something where, if we can get that aligned, those are the things that the technology steering committee discusses.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we are at our time limit, actually a little over our time limit. Is there something in particular that
I think I
you
just
all
want to
need
give
from us?
the 1 minute summation that we've talked to the city manager about is that we have got a great product here that is the roadmap, that is a presentation and that information, and we're going to take those 5 action points and some of that work and repackage that into a plan document that at some point will come back for adoption, and we'll put some thoughts behind budget and the implementation time periods. But we do recognize the immediacy need there of those first items. That's going to take some staff thought and bringing to you all some conversation about getting some of those things implemented.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. We appreciate it and the thought and the action. And you knew we were going to ask about money eventually. So thanks for having that be the next conversation. All right. Before we go, we do have a few boards and commissions. Taylor Burrill interviewed for Arts Commission. Are we good appointing Taylor?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Conrad Hebron for Board of Adjustment.
Yep.
Objection there.
No
Okay.
objection?
And Betty Baer for Business Development Commission.
Yes.
And Emily Horton for a full Green Space Advisory Commission.
Yes.
All right, so we will make all of those appointments.
Yeah.
And that brings this portion of our meeting to a conclusion. Let's take a couple minutes. I know we have some people waiting. All right, welcome to our October 1st regular meeting for the Webster Grove City Council. We are very happy to have you all with us, and we welcome your questions, ideas, comments. If you're here, if you are online, we're going to ask you to use the raise your hand function at that time. If you're in the room and you'd like to make a comment during our time for community comments, you're going to fill out a card like this, which is located right over there by the door on the table there. We'll limit comments to 3 minutes in order to make sure we complete our agenda in a reasonable time. And you'll see the appropriate time and I'll call on you based on these cards. And it's a really good day because it's always a fun day at council when we get to recognize community members for various reasons. So thank you all for being here with us, and we will start with the roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss,
Here.
Councilmember Franklin,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander,
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd, here, Councilmember Hasselmeyer.
Here.
We have to always use the microphone for the recordings now. So the next portion of our meeting is to recognize good neighbors. So the state of Missouri has a Good Neighbor Week, which we are in the middle of right now. And what they ask us to do as communities within the state is invite residents to nominate people in our community who they think have demonstrated acts of good neighbor-ishness, neighborliness, whatever the appropriate word might be. And this year, we had 6 nominations, and we want to take the time to recognize each one of you, and including one couple. And so what I'll do is I'm going to read your little proclamation, and I would ask you then to come forward. We have a small gift for you. And yes, we're going to ask you to get your picture taken. And in fact, maybe we'll get everybody's picture taken together as well. So let me grab those. Nathan Huck, we're going to start with you. You got to come on up here, Nathan. Yeah, everyone has to be able to see you when I read nice things about you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, there we go. And it's all being recorded, so you can show it to whoever you want.
Okay.
All right.
But this one gentleman looks a little shifty over here.
Okay. The city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Nathan Huck for consistently demonstrating acts of kindness by using his diverse practical skills to help neighbors on his block. Nathan's selflessness not only strengthened the sense of community, but also made life a little easier for those around him, particularly older residents who were less able to manage on their own. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank Nathan Huck for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim Friday, October 4th, 2024 as Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. So I will your own Webster Groves logo picnic blanket.
So very much.
Yeah. Yeah. What, Nathan, will you come be in a picture with all your gifts?
Thank you.
Anyone else can come be in the picture. Yeah, come on, Joan. Come be in. Joan is nominated. All right. Thank you, Nathan. Next, we have Kelly Meehan. Mahan? Okay, Meehan. All right, Kelly, thank you. All right. The city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Kelly Meehan for being an extraordinary neighbor whose kindness and leadership made a huge difference during a difficult time. When a neighbor became ill with a benign tumor and was unable to function for weeks before and after surgery, Kelly organized the community to raise funds and stock the family's fridge with meals. She also served as the medical communicator, keeping everyone updated, a task she handled easily as an oncology nurse. Thank you for that as well, by the way. Despite working full-time and caring for her 5 children, Kelly provided invaluable support, making a lasting impact on her neighbors. On behalf of the mayor and the city council, we thank Kelly for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim Friday, October 4th, 2024, Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. Thank you very much for you. Like it as well. We'll be in a picture too. Right, thank you. And we're going to take one with all of you if you want to. So, yeah, thank you. Jim, are you here, Jim? Hi, Jim. Jim, is it, well, I was going to ask you how to say it properly. It is Seppi. I was going to guess right. I should have just gone ahead. All right, here we go, Jim.
See what you have to say.
Well, you can't read over my shoulder. You got to hear it like everybody. The city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Jim Seppi for being a loyal neighbor, Jim Seppi of Tri-Square Construction is a full-time resident of Webster Groves. Jim and his family grew up in Webster and are loyal to the community. He truly cares about the city, its past and forward progress. Jim has renovated many of Webster Groves' homes along with building new construction in a few locations. Jim cares about the entire process from conception with the client to completion. He's always willing to lend a hand when needed and exemplifies what a true neighbor and community developer means to Webster Groves. And here's the part that you all probably have memorized by now. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank Jim Seppi for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim Friday, October 4th, 2024 as Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. Thank you so much. Well. Thank you very much. You're welcome. Steve? Steve, were you able to make it tonight? Oh, good. Steve, come on up. Sias? Sias, thank you. All right. Well, we're happy to have you. So Steve is here representing himself and his wife Brenda as well. So the city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Steve and Brenda Sias for being Webster Groves children's favorite place to play. Steve and Brenda are a generous couple beloved in their community. Years ago, after raising their own children, Steve brought home a wooden play set from a garage sale, transforming their yard into the Steve and Brenda playground. During the pandemic, they welcomed neighbors to use the playset daily. Even now, with new families moving in, the Siases have added a baby swing for the youngest child in the neighborhood. Their garage is filled with toys and child-sized furniture, and children love to gather in their yard to make imaginary stews from pine cones and practice kickball. They are truly wonderful neighbors. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank Steve and Brenda for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim Friday, October 4th, 2024 as Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure you and Brenda have learned how to share by now, but we'll still give you two.
Okay.
Right, thank you very much. Sarah Smith. Hi, Sarah. All right. This is kind of a long one, and it's a good one too. The city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Sarah Smith for quickly responding when a call for help went out to support Geneva, thank you. Capia? Thank you. A student from Sierra Leone who faced losing her education at Webster University due to funding issues. Within an hour, Sarah and her husband, Jeff, offered to host Geneva in their home, providing her with a room and helping her settle in. Sarah took Geneva to cultural events such as the Indigo Girls concert and the Festival of Nations, and is even teaching her how to ride a bike. The Smiths have also been actively working with community members to raise funds for Geneva's tuition and secured flight donations to get her back to school. Through their kindness and effort, Geneva has regained her joy and is excited to continue her studies. And I think she's even in class tonight. It's good. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank Sarah for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim October 4th, Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. So your nomination was really for you, but we understand that you're pointing to Jeff. And Jeff also serves as the chair of our plan commission, so he does a lot to work for the city of Webster Groves. Thank you. All right. Last but not least at all. Well, yeah, come on, Nora. When I said last, and you knew it was you, right? Tell me how to say your last name, though. Zernigable. All right, we'll see how well I do. The city of Webster Groves thanks and honors Nora Zernigable for her dedication to keeping her community safe. She brought attention to a public works issue that had negatively impacted several neighborhood kids' ability to play on their street by writing to the Webster Kirkwood Times. She also met with the mayor to explain the problem and provide pictures to show its effect on the children of the neighborhood. On behalf of the mayor and city council, we thank Nora for your community leadership and do hereby proclaim, do you know what date it is yet? October 4th as Webster Groves Good Neighbor Day in the city of Webster Groves. I didn't mean to give you a quiz. Well, okay, we are going to ask that all of our award winners tonight come back up so we can have the whole council in a picture with all of our award winners. Yes, Nora, you have to come back by me. Come on. And yes, you're going to have to be in the front row. See, no good deed goes unpunished because they did a good thing. Yeah.
I'll be right there.
Yeah, here, go ahead. You'll all be in the middle. Here, Karen, you want to stay there? I'll go up. You're gonna go up. Okay. Are we close enough together?
Yay, neighbors. Me?
No, don't do that. Come this way, just a little bit. There we go.
Wait, this way? Okay, I'm not talking Karen.
All right. Just one more big thank you from all of us to all of you and to all of you who nominated people as well. We really appreciate that. This is what makes Webster a great place to live. All right, yes. And please, if you have other pressing business this evening, please go right ahead. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on now to our remarks from the community and visitors, and we will start with Bud Belomo. I think you know the drill, Mr. Belomo.
Long time since been a long time since I sat up there and longer time since I've been down here. So those were the days. But I want to speak on behalf of Catherine DeHart. She's in the hospital. She's doing well. She'll be out in a couple of days, but she wanted to talk a little bit about what you're going to talk about tonight, and that's Betty Gordon. Okay.
But will you bring that microphone very close to your mouth? You can slide it down. You can slide it down closer to you. You can move the base. That would be fine. We just really can't hear you.
Now?
And you're going to have to do the Bud shouting. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is what Catherine asked me to talk to you about on behalf of Benny Gordon, her memories. These are her words exactly. Many depended on him for his work in real estate. The neighborhood of North Webster Groves relied on him a lot. He was honest, patient, and determined. He had the ability to help you and wanted to help you. He always had the time for you. This is such an honor for him and his family. Where would we be without him and his family? His family deserves this honor. I'm happy to be around to see this happening for the people in our neighborhood. We are blessed. God bless everyone involved. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Bud, and thanks for bringing that on behalf of Catherine. Next, we have Mr. Dave Buck.
To hopefully aid your discussion a little bit later in this meeting, here are the clip notes of our annual pool meeting last week. A simple truth about budgeting is that incomplete assumptions lead to incomplete projections. This is page 75, the master plan, the revenue projections. This, as well as the P and L that came out of it, prompted city council to put the indoor pool on hold on August 1st.
Hey, Dave, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your microphone's not on though.
You want me to start over?
No, you're good. I heard most of that. Thank you very much, Dave.
Well, I'll just say, here are the cliff notes of our indoor pool meeting last week. A simple truth about budgeting is that incomplete assumptions lead to incomplete projections. This is page 75, the revenue projections on the master plan that prompted city council to put the indoor pool on hold on August 1st, 2023. That's when we residents kind of went to work. A municipal pool, any municipal pool, has two primary revenue streams: admissions and swim lessons, often representing 70% or more of the total revenue. The standard admission model, used for years by Webster's outdoor pool and ice arena, has four components: daily admission, season passes, resident rates, non-resident rates. None of those are in this projection except the same flat $4 daily fee for everybody. It's missing a lot. Likewise, there is a standard swim lesson model, including group, semi-private, private lessons, beginner, intermediate, advanced, a final capstone class that introduces kids to competitive swimming. Municipalities offer different resident and non-resident rates, and there are even adult swim lessons. None of those are in this projection on page 75, except the same flat $10 a lesson fee for only one group lesson for everybody. Simply stated, by adding in just a few of these new assumptions and making them more complete, the annual indoor pool revenue projection can dramatically improve and achieve near break even and a cost recovery of over 91%, just like the outdoor pool. Whether you buy into our alternative projections or not, that's your business, but you are leaving a lot of money on the table. It's not too late to take another dip into the indoor pool to find out if we are, to find out, and just know, please, the residents are here to help you in any way that we can and find peace to the indoor pool. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, is there anyone who has any new business? Council?
Just check to make sure no one. Nope.
Oh, yes, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, then we'll move to unfinished business, and Councilmember Smith, you asked to do the third reading of bill number 9269.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final. Yes, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9269 and call for subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9269, third and final reading. An ordinance amending the Code of Webster Groves, Chapter 10, Article 12, Parks, Section 10.1200, Locations, by naming the recreation complex at 33 East Glendale Road, the Benny Gordon Recreation Complex.
All right, do we have any discussion? I believe Councilmember Alexander is we do have some members of the Gordon family with us and give her the opportunity to introduce those who are here. Will you hold your microphone too, please?
Okay, we have both Janice Gordon, Mr. Gordon's daughter, and then we have the youngest son, Keith Gordon. I knew that, Keith Gordon, and we'd like to thank you both for being here. We loved and knew Mr. Gordon very well in the neighborhood, and just watched him not from as closely as you guys had the opportunity to watch him, but to watch him very closely in the things that he did for the community. And so we're very happy to have you here and very happy to be able to complete this act this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Would you please come to the microphone then?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council of Webster Groves. I'm overwhelmed with emotion. Many times we came here and sat in these chairs or similar seats to learn of the decisions of the august body of the planning and zone commissions regarding the utilization of land that my dad had proposed to provide housing for so many in need. His was a long struggle to bring the community together. And I am so overwhelmed with gratitude for the leadership that you have shown. You've acknowledged that no, separate is not equal, and we are not a community if in fact we live in our own respective places. Your willingness to acknowledge what he tried to do, his legacy, means so very much to us. And I appreciate you all for the giant step that you've taken toward a future of greater inclusion. Webster is not at all like I knew it. Webster was very painful for me, but I come here with a new vision, and I appreciate the work that you do, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and the council. I'm also honored and thankful for each and every one of you for your acknowledgement of the great works my dad has performed and tried to do here in the city of Webster. As my sister stated, this has been a long struggle, and Webster Groves has been a community that has offered opportunity to a variety of people. My grandmother's, I'm like a third or fourth generation Websterite. I'm a graduate from Webster Groves High School. Go Statesman. But I've noticed that the city has, through the current leadership, open opportunities to people and to show inclusion, and also to show the true history of what Webster Groves was initially set up to be. We hope that the housing market in this Webster Groves community can be as diverse as the board, or maybe a little more, but but towards that end, I want to just say thank you again, and we want to work. And now that we're doing some things to try to become Webster residents again, and to keep the legacy of what so many people, pioneers, have done here in the community, and hope to be inclusion. And anything we can do to help, we're here for you. Thanks you again.
Thank you. Council members, anyone else have anything they'd like to say?
You looking at me?
I was looking at you. You press the button. When you press the button, that means you have something.
Yes, I want to say, although the North Webster Neighborhood Coalition was the one that submitted the recommendation to name our facility after Benny Gordon. And we have actually a lot of history, what Mr. Gordon did for our city. And we know the painful history that Webster Groves had during that time. Some of it just outright being prejudiced, and some things that just was totally wrong. But I'm glad that we're taking this step forward to acknowledge what we did and trying to make it better. Just to acknowledge what Mr. Gordon meant to this community.
Right, thank you. Okay, well then let's have that vote and make it official.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss?
He did the reading, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, we can go ahead.
Okay. Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd?
Yes.
Councilmember Hassemeyer?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes. I think I was distracted. All right, we'll move on. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you all for the coalition, the members who have been here. And yes, I think it might be a great time if we could take a photo with the members of the Gordon family and the members of the coalition who are here, given the nomination and council too.
Yep.
I believe Mr. Peterson, no, somebody's available to take it. So let's go. Everybody to the front. All right, I'm gonna slide behind you. I don't want. You've got the serious eye. But yeah.
Then you can smile with that. David.
David, they want you to smile.
Isn't my head gonna be like abnormally large compared to everyone else?
There was such thing as a mayoral decree. I decree no more pictures to be in tonight, but. All right, we're gonna move on to new business. Mr. Myers, Director of Planning and Development, is with us to, I believe, give presentation on accessory dwelling units. So thank you very much.
It was interesting. Let's see. Okay. Okay, move this forward.
This out of the way.
Right. All right. Just got to move this back to the where it was. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your patience, sir.
Oh, no problem.
Like the technology in order. I was asked to make a presentation tonight on accessory dwellings. So first, I'd like to talk about what that really means, and then talk about different perspectives that people have concerning accessory dwellings, and then finally end up with Webster Groves, kind of go from big picture to smaller picture. But the thought behind this is, for most communities that are interested in accessory dwellings, expanding housing options. This is not a new concept. It's been actually a really hot
topic for the American Planning Association and its constituent communities, especially in some states like in California, but honestly, it's all over the place. I was looking today at City of Fayetteville, Arkansas. They have their own program for accessory dwelling units, for instance, and to help homeowners and developers succeed in the accessory dwelling process. But what is an accessory dwelling? To break it down, I would say it's a small residence that shares a lot with a larger single-family dwelling. Thank you. And an accessory dwelling is a self-contained unit which has its own kitchen or kitchenette, bathroom, and sleeping area. Typically, in the planning world, we think of a dwelling having those three components, having a kitchen, bathroom, and a sleeping area. Not necessarily a bedroom, but a sleeping area. Accessory dwellings come in different forms. So a lot of times the classic accessory dwelling is maybe a detached structure on the back of the lot. That's in the top left. But it also comes in other forms like attached. There's an interior upper level. You might consider that an attic, lower level. I would say there's building code implications for these. For instance, if you ever have an accessory dwelling or a living space period in a basement, it needs to have egress windows so people can get out in case of fires. The same in attics too. You know, attics have to have an area so that the fire department can do a rescue through a window if they need to. So there are building code implications. We can talk about that. Let's see here. Yeah. There we go. Consumer perspectives. I first like to talk about how consumers are seeing accessory dwellings. Not all consumers, but more and more. There is a lack of options. Again, this is all over the United States that we're experiencing this for different housing needs and preferences. And to give an example, a lot of communities, their housing stock has remained virtually the same or hasn't changed that much, but people's housing needs and preferences have changed a lot in the last 20 to 30 years. That's an example. Also, people are facing rising housing costs and a shortage of affordable housing choices. When I say affordable, for instance, the typical standard is you don't really want people spending more than like 30% of their income on housing. So if you're a police officer, a teacher, a home health care worker, there's lots of different fields. If you figure out 30% of that income, where could that person live in the community? Or can they live in your community? In some communities, the answer is no. I'd also notice that there's a revival of interest, I think, in multi-generational housing. So what do I mean by that? When I turned 18, it was not uncommon for parents to just assume that their kids are going to move out on their own and they're going to start their, an apartment or whatever. But more and more you see parents who are assisting adult children who may need help, financial help, or just starting out. You also see older adults who are needing a viable place to stay, but that's both affordable and independent. Like, for instance, my parents are fiercely independent. They're in their late 80s, early 90s, and they're trying really hard to hang on to the house that they have because they don't really have any options in the community where they live. So that's an example. And then finally, there's long-range demographic changes that are leading to smaller household sizes and increasing numbers of residents that are age 16 over. If I could talk about this just for a second, because I think it's really important for a lot of communities and ours specifically. Globally, there's been a long-term decline in fertility rates. So what I mean by that is only about half the countries around the world now have a sufficient population growth to have a stable population. In fact, about half the countries in the world have declining population because they have more deaths than births. You see that same trend in the United States. United States, Missouri, and the St. Louis metropolitan area all are experiencing the same phenomenon. In fact, demographers have described this as a demographic winter with more deaths than births. What does that mean for communities like Webster Groves? In 1960, we had 3.46 persons per household. In 2020, we had 2.46 persons per household. So what does that mean? Just break it down. Let's just say you have 10,000 households, kind of a static number, because it's in our community, we don't have areas to expand into. If you have 10,000 households in 1960, that could accommodate or would accommodate 34,600 people. But in 2020, those same households will only accommodate 24,600 people. So you have 10,000 fewer people living in the same households in Webster Grove. That's an example. 3 out of 10 Webster Grove householders now live alone. And you think about that, one person, they have there's this big house, how are they going to pay for this house on one person on one, even if they're working full time? Sometimes it's difficult. And also 1 in 4 Webster Grove residents are age 62 and over. 1 in 4. So, homeowner perspectives. The American Association of Retired Persons did a scientific community poll in 2021. They found that the most people most householders that they polled were actually not interested in having an accessory dwelling unit, but about a quarter of the householders were interested in. And these are the top reasons that were provided by those they surveyed. Provide a home for a loved one in need of care, provide housing for relatives or friends, have a space for guests, and et cetera. Now, among those was earned extra rental income, but that wasn't necessarily the top reason that people were interested in this form of housing for those who would be interested in this. Now, community perspectives, there are concerns that are pretty common around the United States in that there's common themes about community concerns. So the American Planning Association has enumerated these common concerns, including changing in neighborhood character, reduced backyard privacy for neighbors. What do I mean by that? So you're out in your garden in the backyard, you look over 5 feet away across the property line, there's a residence there, someone's bedroom window. So you feel like that someone's, kind of watching over you potentially. Some communities are worried about increased density, adding traffic, school enrollment. Actually, in a lot of communities, school enrollment has been declining, so it's not necessarily that too much of a factor, but in certain jurisdictions it is or could be a factor. Concern about increased demand for emergency services, et cetera. Let's see here. Oops, wrong way, sorry. This slide just kind of gives an overview of common local barriers. I won't go over this in detail, but I would say that communities that are looking at the idea of providing accessory dwellings, the barriers that they're encountering can be summarized as policymaking, regulatory barriers, procedural barriers, and then financial barriers for those who are interested in moving forward. So these are good to take into consideration. Specifically for City of Webster Grove's zoning regulation, what's interesting is Webster Grove's, well, first let me give a brief overview. The A districts in Webster Groves, which are considered to be this principally single-family residential districts, single-family dwellings are permitted by right, but you'll also notice that residential structures and garages are permitted by right as accessory uses. Now, what does that really mean, residential structures and garages? First, we have to look at the definitions that's in our zoning for single-family dwelling, family, and accessory dwellings. And I would note that accessory dwellings is a subordinate building or portion of the main building with a use incidental to the main use of the premises. City zoning already allows accessory buildings to be used as living accommodations in single-family districts. But there's a caveat here. First is that it's for a part of the family residing in the main building or for a domestic service employee. It's for a maximum of 2 people. It can't be rented on its own. It can't have a separate electric meter. It must have a certificate of occupancy. So for instance, it could be used for an office space, and there's a variety of spaces that it could be used for. The question I have, just coming into this, is whether living accommodation in fact includes a full accessory dwelling or not. So some options for consideration. First, I'd say if you're interested in this sort of in accessory dwellings potentially for Webster Groves, one way forward might be to clarify whether the term living accommodations actually includes a self-contained dwelling unit. Or does it include, say, 2 or the 3 different elements like sleeping accommodations and a kitchenette, but not a bathroom, for instance, or something like that. Also consider zoning updates to allow living accommodations to be occupied by more than 2 residents or potentially rented. A larger question is whether or not you would want to update zoning definitions to recognize changes in household composition and housing needs. And again, I go back to the definition of a, make sure I get this right. Family, which is 1 or more persons. Essentially, everyone's related except for up to 2 unrelated persons. So you could have any number of related persons by blood, marriage, adoption, plus up to 2 unrelated persons. But again, with demographic changes, that's really having an impacting on communities and the definitions for single family dwelling and family. I would say more than anything, if you're interested in pursuing accessory dwellings, that'd be something that you could create by right development standards rather than by making it a discretionary case-by-case process. So for instance, discretionary case-by-case process, some communities require applicants to go before the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Planning Commission, I should say, and the City Council, and it may or may not get approved based on the discretionary process. I think it would be valuable to have by right development that has specific standards that are laid out in advance. For instance, if you're concerned about actually having 2 dwellings on the property as primary uses rather than an accessory dwelling use, you could place a square footage limitation on the accessory dwelling that ensures that it is smaller than an accessory to the much larger or larger home, I should say. That's one way to address that. If you have any questions or comments or any feedback, I'd be welcome to hear that.
This is great. I thank you for putting this together. I think it's really, really helpful to understand kind of to lay it out. So I appreciate the time you put into it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I definitely, it's something that I would be interested in seeing us look into more.
So it looks to me from this presentation is that when we're talking about how we currently regulate accessory dwelling units, we're actually not regulating the unit so much, we're regulating the occupancy of the unit. Is that a fair?
That's what I want. There's 2 things that we do. One is we need to ensure what kind of unit that we're talking about, and then also second, the occupancy of that unit. Webster Groves, unlike a lot of communities, we actually we register occupants of dwellings. So when someone else moves in, we actually take their name and we keep a roll of everyone who lives in that dwelling. And we ask what the relationship is. We ask who's unrelated. You know, those are extra steps that the Webster Groves takes.
What is the,
Is that, one of the things that comes up sometimes is, you know, and you addressed it to some degree about making sure one's primary and one's secondary.
Yeah.
But this idea that people could build whatever they wanted to build, well, it seems to me that under our current zoning, people really can build almost anything they want to build within our current framework. But we're at this point saying you can't rent it, you can only have your family member live there, and you can only have somebody who works in your household there.
Right.
So I think it's a little, it makes me think about it a little differently because it's not so much about what can be built.
Madam Mayor, I'm so sorry. You're on a roll. Would you please turn it on?
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's not so much about what can be built that we're talking about. Although I do take your point that we need a better definition. But it is also about these whole set of occupancy rules that we have more broadly. And I hadn't really thought of it that way. I had thought about the structure more than I had thought about the occupancy part. So I appreciate that.
Okay.
what are the repercussions in Webster if someone fails to update their occupancy permit?
Update or obtain occupancy in the first
I
place?
understand, I understand that we're going to force you to obtain one, but what are the repercussions if you fail to update it? Are there repercussions? In other words, what I'm getting at, this seems to me, occupancy in general seems to me to be a law that is only enforced at the beginning and never throughout. There's no repercussions, so what's the point of it?
Robert, if I may, I'll just jump real fast. There are repercussions so that you're supposed to register if there's a change. A lot of people don't. And in the event that we would find that it would come to the attention of the city of Webster Groves, if they're doing an inspection for some reason or someone is there and the occupants don't match up to what we have on the list, then under those circumstances, there can be repercussions.
How many
We can
times
take
have we
action to try and
prosecuted that
remove
over
them.
the past 3 years?
The problem is, that's right, David, there's no way to really know who's there.
I mean, but what I'm saying is, why is it on the books? If we never prosecute it, if we don't prosecute it, why is it on the books?
Well, we do prosecute them when we find out. The problem is, how do you find out?
Do we know how many times we prosecuted over the past 3 years? Past year, I don't care how long. Take your time frame.
I couldn't give you a number, but I know that there have been occupancy violations that have come before the court.
And what are the repercussions? What are the legal ramifications?
Well, typically what they look for is compliance. Typically what they look for is that you get yourself compliant with the law, which also then might require additional inspections, that sort of thing. And so that generally speaking is the purpose. The goal is compliance. Sometimes there can be fines. I actually don't know what Judge Laritz is doing. I don't know if he has had any, David, or Councilman Franklin, pardon me. But again, the ultimate goal is compliance.
Yeah, there's.
I mean, it seems like an additional step that we don't need, particularly when we're talking about accessory dwelling units. I mean, this seems like an avenue for us to explore not using occupancy or not requiring occupancy permits. There aren't going to be that many ADUs initially. Let them try. Let's see how the world works without an occupancy permit.
So I'm going to take that as a suggestion that we fold the discussion about occupancy permits that we've been talking about having into the same discussion. David, it sounds like that's what you're suggesting too.
Well, it sounds like, yeah, if we can't really move forward with ADUs without first determining whether we're going to go forward with occupancy.
Yeah,
because
and
it
I was
seems
going to ask staff how comfortable or uncomfortable they are with that.
So, and I apologize, I didn't quite hear what Councilman Franklin said, but we have been talking for some time about the occupancy requirements and working towards, and so this will be new to Mr. Myers, who did an excellent presentation with just a few weeks in, so thank you for doing this.
Yes, absolutely.
But we've talked about decoupling the safety inspection from the actual occupancy piece, because there is a need to have the safety inspection, but do we really need to track who lives in what dwelling when they move, who the new person moves in? So there's some decoupling, and I believe I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's something different that Webster does that is not done in most municipalities.
I don't know about most, but there are many municipalities don't track that. For example, in St. Charles County, where I worked previously, we don't track that. There are a few court cases that you might be interested in. You could probably tell us more about, but one of them was like Loving versus the City of Blackjack, Missouri, which is a famous case where there was a couple and their children. They were an unmarried couple, and they were their respective children. And the City of Blackjack said, you're going to have to move because you're more than two unrelated people here. And so anyway, that was a pretty famous court case. That was, I want to say, the early 2000s. But it just so happens that we have no more than two unrelated people here as well. We have any number of people, blood marriage, adoption, plus no more than two unrelated people, which I think was the same as what Blackjack had back in the early 2000s. So anyway, it's interesting. I know that St. Louis University, their law department did a study specifically on family and household definitions within the St. Louis region. I think they looked at both the Missouri and Illinois sides. And there was a report that they did, comparative report, but it's been about 10 years ago now. But that might be interesting to look at.
Well, I
Thank
guess
you very much.
Yeah, sorry, David, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I think probably what you all want from us then is some indication about whether we want to pursue this. What is the decision-making point that you would like from us at the moment?
So we really came to two decision points.
Yeah.
One rather accidentally, but is the council interested in us pursuing decoupling of the occupancy and the tracking and doing the safety inspections? And number two, the focus of tonight's presentation, is council interested in moving forward with updating our accessory dwellings?
So let's take the second council before the first. And so are we interested in moving forward with some additional information, maybe a proposal on ADUs?
I say yes.
Additional information? Okay. And then the second one then is occupancy, decoupling occupancy and safety. Are we, I don't know that I'd say pursue that at this point, but I'd like some presentation sort of like this about what that means. What are the implications of doing that? I mean, that's my personal position. I don't know if others have other different.
Especially some information about because I wasn't familiar with that case. And if that, I mean, it sounds like that case was in Blackjack. Was a case with addressing the very thing that we have on our book. I'd be very. And.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested in.
All right. I'm looking up and down. David, I assume from your early response that, yeah, I can see the head nodding. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, to echo what Dr. Peoples said, we have like totally given you a baptism by fire, and thank you for once again a very helpful and informative presentation. Really,
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's helpful for to hear your thoughts and views.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move now on to Mr. Davis, Director of Parks and Recreation, Indoor Pool.
Good evening. So I've got a couple slides to show you this evening to kind of kickstart your discussions, and then we will see where that leads us. So the first is the capital cost related to indoor pool project. As you guys have seen these numbers before, let me slide this out of the way. The construction estimate to enclose the competition pool only to make it a full year-round facility was estimated at about $3.8 million through our master planning design that we did in the 2023 year. So that's kind of listed there on the side. One of the things we've been talking about was the Dynadome footing, potentially being able to put that Dynadome footing in. The cost for just to put that footing in now would be about $139,000. That's about $25,000 worth of engineering fees. I think I've beat them down a little bit on that, but definitely $114,000 worth of construction costs for the footings to be poured and placed, should we choose to do that now. We have not greenlit that yet in our construction process. We are doing change order requests right now on the outdoor pool in that project. So far, they've submitted close to $900,000 worth of change orders that they're requesting, and we're whittling that down pretty hard. Some of those are related to MSD. There's really no way to get around it. We had to do a bunch of MSD work, which is almost $300,000. Increasing the stand-up slide is close to $300,000. So there's another couple $100,000 that we're still working on, which would include that $140,000 here for the footings. The bigger question I think that you guys have discussed in relation to Proposition W and the past was the indoor pools. Move this box back up to the top here. Was the indoor pools operating cost? So on the August 1st, 2020 meeting, you guys gave direction to us to not include that proposition, indoor pool option into Proposition W. And the big reason for that is through the master planning process, they came up with $239,000 would be the deficit on the operating costs, including all the revenue that would come off the indoor pool for the additional 9 months of usage outside of the summer season, and taking back all the expenses, we'd end up with about $240,000. We actually added another $42,000 into that back in 2023 for additional staffing. The number that they had provided was for a full-time staff member was lower than we could get in the marketplace. And we also added in some additional maintenance custodial needs, because if you're going to be open 9 months through the winter, we would need some help on evening and weekend custodial coverage, cleaning the restrooms that would go along with that aquatic facility and such. So total deficit would be about in the $280,000 range. That was, of course, a year ago. So with inflation and salary increases that we've done, you're probably pushing that up a little bit higher, but I kept that number the same because that's what we had been discussing for the last year or so. Just to show you where those costs came from, the cost recovery, the final master plan document there for anybody playing at home. There's the address that's on the city's website. You can go find it. But on page 76, list out those cost recoveries at about 51%. And just for an aside, on the other pools in the area that we have contacted, none of the other pools, municipalities, counties that run pools are getting anywhere near breaking even. So it's just on an indoor pool, you're just really never going to break even. So at the time, Cape Girardeau had the bubble convertible pool, much like we're talking about, 8-lane summer outdoor pool that they put a structure up over the rest of the season to get a full 12-month out of it. They were at about 28%. Kirkwood School District that just built their new natatorium for about $10 million in 2020, I believe it was. It is sitting at about 65%. City of Baldwin, 66%. St. Peter's, it has the largest pool and rec center complex in the world. They do they've actually done Olympic trials for swimming. They're massive. They're only breaking in about 76%. And then many of the cities and school districts don't keep everything separated. So it's very difficult to actually determine that. But all the folks that I talked to in the previous city I worked at, I can tell you that all of them said that they don't get close to breaking even. So, and then the expenses and revenues, again, off the master plan document, page 75 and 71, list those individual figures. And I just circled them for you. So that's pretty much the presentation that we have. We just wanted to refresh those numbers for you guys so that you guys can have your discussions, and happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I'll throw it to Dr. Peoples if she had any other comments off that. Okay, she does not.
Okay, before we discuss though, I think we need to be clear here is that we need an actual decision, right? This has been hanging around for a while, and the decision that we're talking about is, do we want, I guess there are two possible decisions. Do we want to continue the discussion of the indoor pool? If yes, at what point in time? And I think staff is asking for us to really set that point in time on the calendar, probably further out, so we can get some of the other projects that are in front of them right now really finished, to understand where we are there. Or if council is ready to say full up or down on the indoor pool, I suppose that could be what happens right now as well. So I guess right now what we need is your reaction to whether you'd like to have this at some point in the future, and if so, when that might be. I mean, Dr. Peoples and I have discussed, a 4-year out timeline or so, because Prop W would be largely completed at that point, if that's the discussion, or potentially, a full decision. And I just put those out as discussion points if people have other preferences.
So if we came to a full decision, could that be addressed later? As far as, let's say we said no, can that be reversed later?
Pretty much no of this council is, we can always reverse ourselves. Yes. I mean, we can come back to the issue. I think the important thing now for us is to give staff some direction under the umbrella of Prop W and what they're already working on. Is that a fair?
Thank you, Madam
statement?
Mayor, it is. I mean,
Okay.
decisions can always be changed later, and that was really where we're coming up with the time frame. And I mean, 4 years would be great. That's a rather arbitrary number, but we are, as Mr. Davis said, we're at some critical decision points. And so having this lingering and floating, and council at one time did give a no, but we heard more community interest, and so council said, let's throw this out there and think about it again and go through the numbers again. And we appreciate that. From the staff perspective, we have came to the same side. I cannot recommend moving forward. I certainly would love to be able to recommend moving forward, but without additional revenue options, it makes it incredibly difficult, that revenue replacement. So in short, yes, it could be revisited later, but we would hope for at least for a couple-year time period, we would have a definite answer so we can move forward.
The thing that sticks out for me is because I know that as we've talked about it, and even when we said no at that time, I thought that there was interest in taking advantage of putting the footings in now so that that is in place at this point in the construction, which would probably be less expensive than doing this same thing later.
So, and Mr. Davis certainly could probably speak to the details of this better, but during Prop W and through all the conversations, what we have stated is that we would plan the engineering for the footings.
Right.
And we have held true to that. We have made all of the plans with the footings. So I think what you're discussing is actually pouring and putting the footings in, which I believe you just said that was around $130,000 if we were to do that now. There's some complications with that though, if we were to go ahead and do that now. And there's complications if we don't. I mean, either way, there are costs on either side. So we don't actually have a contract with Dynadome that if council were to move forward later and to do the pool. So to put the footings in without having those contracts in place is problematic. So that is why we initially said and have stayed true to planning for the footings. So Scott, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's 100% right. We've been in many discussions with Dynadome and Westport Pools, who's our design builder, trying to navigate that. Short of paying Dynadome, they won't release engineering. Without releasing engineering, how does Westport design it into their footings, and how do we get it through planning processes so that we can get structural load calculations, all that kind of stuff. So it's possible to do it either way. We certainly could come back in the future and put it in. It likely would cost a little bit more because we'd have to do some more demo. We'd have to take out some of the concrete slab that we have now but we wouldn't be interfering with any of the pool walls or anything. It would just be the concrete slab outside of the pool. So you'd have to demo that out and dig out some dirt to put those footings in. I would say if you wanted me to ballpark estimate that, if you came back and did that 3 years from now, you probably look at 200,000 instead of 140,000. That's a best guesstimate, but that's just me making a random guess too.
At least I was of the understanding that we were going to go ahead and install the footings so that it would be there when we made a decision to put the dome up. Like you said, I believe it's going to cost more to do it later than doing it now while the demo and putting it in place. Now, would the type of footings be different? I guess they say we put the footings in now, 2 years from now, we want a dome. I guess the domes might not have that type of footings. So that's a risk that we're taking.
You'd be locked into Dynadome for
Yeah.
sure. If they go out of business or something, then you've spent 150,000 plus. Now you're gonna have to activate that to go with a different vendor, or if they change their structure. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns there. And it is a large dollar amount when we are bumping up against the edge of our budget right now on the outdoor pool as well. So there's certainly a spend now consideration too.
And so when we look at the differences between the other municipalities in the area, and none of them are evidencing or showing that they've been able to break even on the cost of the indoor pools or what have you. So then what that does to me, for me, you know, when I think about the conversation around the additional revenue that we may not have considered, I would think that those other municipalities are incorporating those type of additional variances in their revenue, and they still don't feel that they're breaking even. They're still not breaking even.
Correct. And if you look at some of those other municipalities, they have other additional funding sources. Two of those are Richmond Heights and De Pere have malls, so they're collecting a lot of mall tax. One of them's Maryland Heights, which has got casino revenues. So some of those cities may be able to more easily absorb that potential deficit spending based on their funding sources.
So then my final question becomes, I mean, because one of the things that we've been very clear about since the inception of the discussion is our problem wasn't the cost of building it, our problem was the cost of maintaining it. So if we've got more of our citizens saying we want a pool, indoor pool, then what is the capacity for going back to them and saying, how do you propose to pay for it? Because we see now, we can't do an unfunded project. So, you know, how is that something that can go on the ballot? Can you go back to them, or is that something else in the bond funds that we don't do to do that? Well, that doesn't help because we're
Right.
talking about
Right.
additional money for funding the expense, so.
Correct.
So one of the things, and we haven't talked about this yet, you know, I got your responses about priorities, and I am in the process of putting those all together to get them back out to you. But one of the things that rose to the top of many people wanting to discuss over the next 6 months to the year is additional sources of revenue. Because we're going to need them, not for the pool. We've got contracts to be negotiated, things like that. From my perspective, I would like to put the pool discussion to the end of Prop W so that we can consider all the revenue, the landscape of revenue that we might need or want. So if we have to go to the voters, we're asking for everything at once rather than saying, next year, we want, you know, operating for the pool. And then 2 years from now, well, we've got some staffing issues because we don't have enough staff. I feel like a piecemeal approach to asking people for what we're going to need over the next decade is probably not, it's not going to bode well, I don't think, for success, to be honest.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just, so my recollection of our previous discussion of this was not necessarily that we were going to put the footings in, but that we were going to build a pool in a way that we could do that in the future. So I'm wondering about the part where you said we would need to demo concrete? Cause I thought we were gonna design it so that we wouldn't have to do something like that in the future.
So we wouldn't have to do anything to the actual pools, but the flat concrete deck, 4-inch concrete pour that goes, that people sit chairs on or you walk around, you'd have to demo that out so that you could put the new footings in and then pour
Is
that deck
'cause
back
the
on.
footings would go inside the boundaries of that as opposed to outside the
It
boundaries?
would go
of that deck?
outside of the pool. So.
Right, but
yeah.
inside of the deck of.
Inside the deck, yes.
inside the deck.
Yeah.
'Cause I think in my mind, I was picturing it like outside of the deck, so.
The deck butts all the way up to the wall of the ice rink, from basically like it is now where the competition pool is to the ice rink. You'd have to remove a portion of that concrete decking so that you could then put the wall footing in and then you'd re-pour the deck.
I follow that, cause yeah, okay, I'm with you on that. Another question I had was the meeting that y'all had talking with community about other revenue sources and ideas. Did these numbers change in any way after that discussion? Or are they still they're still our collective best guess?
Yes, these are the numbers from the consultant that we hired that does this all day long, every day. This is what they do. These are the numbers that they put together, and they would use the same. They've got 128 point criteria that they put all these numbers together through and their software, and they would put these same numbers together for any other municipality that did it. These are the numbers that they came up with. Obviously, any of those you can manipulate and make them work higher or lower. You can charge more money, which would give you more revenue. You could add more staff. Utilities could go up, which will make expenses more. So any of that stuff is in flux. But I feel pretty comfortable that with those numbers that you're looking at, somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 operating deficit every year that you would have an indoor pool running.
To Council Member Alexander's point, the other municipalities that you looked at are looking not at projections, but at actuals. So they are looking at all the revenue streams that are available to them. So it's good to see that range of cost recovery. And I think we also talked about, we don't necessarily need 100% cost recovery, but we would like it to be higher than 51 before it would be kind of more palatable. So for me, for guidance, I would like to put it off for, 3-4 years till we're farther into Prop W and have had those other revenue discussions. I don't know that I necessarily want to take it off the table completely right now, but I'm not ready to give a green light either.
So the expense number you gave, 281,000, is that just through 2026?
That was a year one cost based
At
on
year one.
2023 numbers.
Okay,
So you're going to see cost escalations on that.
So can we get a cost escalation maybe over the next 5, 7, 8, 10 years?
I could project that personally. We don't have that in our master plan. We've finished that portion and we paid those contractors their fees. We could go back to them and see if what that would cost for them to project that out, or, Mr. Peterson and I could sit down and try to put pen to paper and do some of that. Some of that's going to be unknown because we're not going to know what utility cost type increases are going to be. We can, average those out of what they've been over the last couple of years historically, but.
So, I'd like to know that number. And two, if this is something I believe that the community want, well, first I'd like to see maybe a year full of revenue that it generates, the pool by itself.
You mean the outdoor pool?
The outdoor pool.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, was that 1 year or 2 years? I don't know. So we can get some type of average what might be generated. I believe people are going to come to the pool next year just because it's new. We're probably going to be pulling people all the way from St. Charles just to come see it.
Yep.
Because it's new. But I also like to put the footings. I like to be ready for that dome. I'm in favor of the dome, but if we don't have a plan or have any type of revenue to come in to take care of their expenses, that's just not going to work. So if it's something that the community they want, they have the ability to say, yes, we do. with a tax increase, or no, we don't, voting it down. Then that's the decision that we have to live with.
Jamie, do you have anything you want to come back?
I think it's important to put this question to the voters, to the residents, just because if that's that's a hefty deficit to consider. And to Karen's point, I don't think that, that's very fair to to us to put forth a unfunded.
Yeah, and, we're gonna have something on the ballot in April. I mean, we're gonna pay the cost for something going on the ballot. It won't cost us any more to put this on the ballot. They're gonna say yes or no.
But what Laura said made sense to me is that we're having a fuller revenue discussion. And if we're gonna go to, that doesn't sound like something we'd be through and ready to have to go on the ballot in April.
No, we'd have to have that. We would have to know by the first part of December exactly what we were going to send to the voters so we could pass the appropriate ordinance to get on the ballot in time.
I mean, because I would like to put it in front of the voters, but it makes sense to me to not go back and forth and back and forth. If
the voters deny it, okay, I mean, they've spoken. And it's just go with the outdoor pool.
It's really just asking them, or are you, and it may not even be something, I don't know.
Well, you ask them, I mean, you get some type of tax rate, whatever it might be, and say, are you willing for your taxes to be increased by this amount to pay for the indoor pool expenses? I'm not talking about the dome itself, but just the expenses. That's my concern, is just having those expenses generated by some kind of revenue year after year after year after year.
And I think, Emerson, you and I are in agreement with that. I would like the voters to vote. I've always said I'd like the voters to vote on this, but I don't want them to vote on this without understanding the totality of what we might be asking them for over the next few years. So sending it in April, we won't have a full negotiated contract with the police union at that time. So we won't know what our personnel budget might look like over the next 5 years. Maybe a year or two from now, we'd have to go back to ask for something to cover some of those public safety costs in personnel, because we also all know how competitive right now it is to hire police and fire. That's why I fear going for that, because the voters are going to say, okay, well, we just passed the tax increase. What did you do with it?
Say, put it on your pool.
Yeah, and some of the people are going to come back and say, oh, you put it on a pool and we need it to pay police and fire, which is why I'd like people to make a choice together, personally. David, I wanted to see if you had anything to say, because I sort of forgot that you were there, and I apologize
No,
for that.
It's okay. I am frankly pretty confused. I really like the idea of direct democracy, but I don't think that this is an appropriate thing for direct democracy. Think about, and while I agree with Emerson, we have stuff on the ballot already. This requires a lot of education, and it requires a lot of staff time. We've been talking a lot about how do we decrease the request that we're putting on staff, and then also what we're requesting of the voters. This is very nuanced. I think it's better for us to hold town halls or meetings and everything, get more people's perceptions, and make a decision, which we were elected to do, rather than going to the voters. I think this is too nuanced, and I think there's too many moving parts for us to expect everyone to be able to make an informed decision. So I like the idea of it. I mean, I voted for a indoor pool. It was shot down by this council. We moved forward with Prop W. Prop W passed. I think we need to continue on with Prop W. And if we want to do an indoor pool, we figure out how to do it later.
Okay, do you have anything you want to add, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we could talk about this. We've talked about this, I think, more than almost any other subject in the last year or so. So I know we could keep talking about it. I'm going to ask if anybody has a motion. If no one else has a motion, I rarely make motions, but I'm prepared to do one. All right, I'm going to move that we postpone any just further discussion of an indoor pool until, for at least 3 years, or until we have completed our full review of revenue options for what do we call it? Our fiscal plan. So that's a very unclear motion. So let me do it.
Second.
I'm glad you understood, David. All right, so it's postponing until we have this fiscal, the revenue discussion. And did I say 4 years?
Does that mean a minimum of 3? or a
Yes, that
maximum
would
of
be a
3?
minimum of 3 and a revenue discussion. Any
I'll
discussion?
second. Oh, I do have a question. I have a question for Scott. So Scott, throughout all this, from other community members, all I heard is that we're leaving all this money out there on the table. This swim team would be willing to pay $50,000. This swim team be willing to pay $100,000. You know, I said, bring them to the table. But have you heard any type of chatter that's really real?
They were all invited to the table during the master planning process, and all the swim teams did show up and attend a group session just for them. Webster University, Nairxall, Webster Groves High School, and our club swim team, Webster Waves. Nobody came forward with any what I will call significant funding. They all said that they would rent lap lanes from us and practice at our facility, but nobody came through with any additional funding like we did on the tennis courts, where we had partners that helped actually build those tennis courts. That was capital cost, wasn't any operating cost, but yes, nobody came through with any significant funding.
3 years is a normal period to get some kind of idea of what the cost is going to be. But for the outdoor pool, but we'll never know what the indoor pool is going to cost.
You mean how much money we're gonna make?
Right.
That's the bigger question.
That's the bigger question, you know, because we're still going to be asking the same questions about the expenses the indoor pool is going to bring 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. Just don't know.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Is there any more further discussion of the motion?
What was the motion again?
You're gonna make me remember my own motion?
Table it for 3 years and until after we've had our full revenue review.
Correct.
Can I modify that?
You may amend the motion. You
Yes.
have to move to amend the motion.
I'd like to move to amend the motion.
Go, proceed.
So, I mean, by postponing the review for 3 years, that means it's off the table, period. What happens if we get some additional revenue that would make that possible?
We can always change our minds.
Yeah, I know, but it's fixed by you saying 3 years. I want to
All we have to do is vote to reopen the issue. That's all we have to do. It's fixed because we have made a decision to make it fixed. We can then make a decision to reopen the discussion at some point.
based on our revenue levels for the city.
Is that what your motion is?
Yes.
Okay. Does everyone understand? Oh, wait, we don't have a second yet, do we?
No, it's just that, you know, that we get something, well, I'll say it, you know, we get somebody selling medicinal marijuana. I mean, that's tax revenue that's coming in that we wasn't expecting to make us do more things.
So if you don't mind, Emerson, just to be simpler, I might suggest that you withdraw that motion, because all you have to do if that comes up is bring to council to say, I'd like to reopen this issue because we have this additional source of revenue. It doesn't necessarily have to be what we vote on, because it is your right as a council member in every meeting.
But just as long as everybody understands, just because we did 3 years, it can't come back up in 2 years. It can't come back up in 1 year.
It just has to come up if the council agrees as a whole that we're going to bring it back up.
Okay, I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Let's go ahead and vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd? Yes. Councilmember Hasselmeyer?
Yes.
Mayor Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
So we can honestly tell the community that, we'll look at this in 3 years.
Yes, and we still, and I will, when people ask me, I will still say, I intend to give the voters the option, but to say yes or no on revenue, but that was within the broader picture of where we are.
I have one more non-indoor pool question for Director Davis. You mentioned the change orders and there sounded like there was a large one related to the stand-up slide. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, so the original design had two different platform heights for slides. The stand-up slide was at a lower platform than the other slides. To have that, we would need an additional guard sitting on that lower slide. So it would increase our annual operating expenses by having an additional guard there. So what we've been looking at is to increase that slide for the stand-up slide to be the same height, vertical height as the other slide. So it's all in one tower. So one guard can sit there. Over the course of the lifespan, we'll actually save more money by doing that, by not having additional staff. But it's an upfront cost and just shy of $300,000 to do that. That would also get us the world's largest stand-up slide that we would likely go for a Guinness Book of World Records for.
Does it? That's a pretty.
But it's a big number. It is a big number. And we have not approved it yet because of all the other change orders that have been submitted. And we need to make sure that we can do this in a reasonable amount in our set budget. And so that's the one big ticket item that we're really holding on to as we finalize these change orders over hopefully the next 3 days, more likely 10 days to get these final costs put together and we can sign off on them.
They had engineers look at it and all that stuff.
They did, and when they originally proposed it in their $11 million bid, it was almost two different levels. So it was a request of us to take a look at what that would be to get it up to that height. We've known about it since end of February, beginning of March, on what that dollar amount would be. Again, we've been holding on approving that due to the other design change. We made a whole lot of different design requests and changes, and some of them we've already cut because they weren't worth the money. Some of them we're looking at still keeping because it'll either provide such a benefit to the residents and members that it's worth it, or it'll reduce our operating costs. Like the slide would actually pay for itself. I think I did the break even was about year 17, that it actually breaks even with the need for less guards to man it.
Making those.
I would have said 2 months ago, had you asked me 2 months ago. So what's our typical stand? 2 weeks, right? I had a very strong conversation yesterday and today with them that I need final numbers this week so that we can approve them because we're building and we haven't finalized all the design numbers yet because one of the subs is not turning in quality numbers. They keep putting sales tax in their bids and such. And it's like, we're tax exempt. Please remove the $5,000 with the sales tax. I've told you this 6 weeks running. So as soon as we get those finalized numbers, we're ready to sign on the dotted lines for the ones that we think are valuable and worth the cost.
Director Davis has done a terrific job keeping all of the contractors accountable, but this is a subcontractor of our contractor, as already explained. So would have been nice to have this nailed down a while ago. However, some of this is part of the process because for the first time, I believe it's our first project, we're doing a design build. So we're going through that process all the way. So there will still be some changes, but we are building. It's going.
It's going.
It's going.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation and all the work. I mean, you have your hands in a lot of pots these days, don't you?
Speaking of
A
which,
few.
Scott, thank you very much for fixing the dog fountain at the Lorraine Davis Park.
I had nothing to do with it, but you're welcome. I will pass
To say getting it.
I will pass it along to my staff. You're welcome. Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to suggest, since the hour is late, that maybe we postpone our climate resilience fund, if that is all right with discussion. Okay. So we will do that, and then I'm going to ask Councilmember Hasselmeyer to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9270.
I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9270. Did I get that?
Bill 9270, first reading. An ordinance authorizing and directing Missouri American Water Company to install one fire hydrant proximal to 680 West Lockwood Avenue in the city of Webster Groves, Missouri.
Is there discussion? All right, let's have that second reading, please.
Bill 9270, second reading. An ordinance authorizing and directing Missouri American Water Company to install one fire hydrant proximal to 680 West Lockwood Avenue in the city of Webster Groves, Missouri.
All right, thank you. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right, Councilmember Alexander, could you call for its approval, please?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yeah.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Hasselmeyer,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, we've made some appointments to boards and commissions. Taylor Brill has been appointed to the Arts Commission, Conrad Hebron to the Board of Adjustment, Betty Bayer to the Business Development Commission, and Emily Horton has been appointed for a full term to the Green Space Advisory Commission. We are going to have a very brief closed session.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session related to personnel, Missouri statute 610.021 subsection 3.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Hasselmeyer,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, thank you all.
Strategic planning discussion.
No, because I have so many different formats of